Freedom of the press is one of the basic principles of the U.S. Constitution. The First Amendment of the Constitution states, "Congress shall make no law abridging of the freedom of speech or of the press." Originally, the First Amendment protected citizens from censorship by federal government, but state governments often censors newspapers. Even though this freedom has been part of the Constitution since 1791, the assumption that the press cannot be prohibited by publishing stories was not established until 1931 by the Supreme Court case of Near v. Minnesota. The plaintiff in the case is the state of Minnesota. The defendant is J. M. Near, who published a scandal sheet in Minnesota called the Saturday Press. Near published stories about local officials and corruption. In particular, Near's paper claimed that local officials were involved with gangsters. In November 1927, Minnesota got an injunction to stop Near from publishing his newspaper. They based the injunction on a 1927 law that stated it was a crime to publish obscene, lewd, or lascivious, or malicious, scandalous, and defamatory material. Under this law, newspapers had to get official approval before publication. The publishers had to show good motives and justifiable ends for what they planned to print. If they couldn't, the newspaper could be censored in advance, also known as prior restraints. Near had to destroy the last 3 months of his paper and was prevented from publishing any further editions that contained the same type of material. The Minnesota Supreme Court upheld the law and the order against Near, so the case went before the Supreme Court of the United States. In a close decision, the Supreme Court voted 5-4 to declare the Minnesota gag law unconstitutional and overturn the injunction against Near. The court confirmed that the freedom of press is one of the freedoms protected by the 14th Amendment from state interference. Because of this case, Minnesota and all other states must obey the First Amendment when it comes to the freedom of press. The Near case was the key precedent in New York Times Company v. United States, in which the court ruled against the Nixon administration's attempt to stop publication of the Pentagon Papers. The administration tried to use the few restrictions of Near to stop newspapers from printing an embarrassing report about the government's involvement in the Vietnam War. The Near case does not prevent individuals such as celebrities and politicians from filing libel lawsuits against tabloid publishers. Near was an important case because it applied the First Amendment's freedom of the press and freedom of speech sections to state government's actions through the 14th Amendment. Also, the case set a precedent that has to set the standards for the freedom of the press, bearing any exceptional circumstances. An example would be during wartime. Editors and publishers know they have the free to print their stories about public officials without fear of punishment or being censored by the state.